Hey Stampers, this is Kathy Hansen, and today I'm going to show you how to do this beautiful Christmas in July Christmas card. I did this at a stamp camp in Longmont this past weekend, July 9th, and the theme of that camp stamp was Christmas in July. So although that's not one of my favorite themes, because I truly believe Christmas in July is an overdone theme that everyone does, but nonetheless, I decided to embrace the idea, so I brought Christmas things for the drawing gifts. I brought my Christmas tablecloth. I wore one of my Christmas t-shirts, and we had a great time. So this card, all of the materials used to assemble this card are Stampin' Up. The tools that I'm going to use are not necessarily Stampin' Up, but all of the materials you see in this card are from Stampin' Up, and I'll tell you more about those as we go along. The inside just says a simple greeting. Let's get started. So this is the kit, and these are the pieces parts for the front, which I'm going to set aside. Except for this piece, I'm going to pull out this piece because we're going to be stamping that first. And these are the pieces for the inside. And again, I'm going to pull out this piece because we're going to stamp that before we can do anything else. And I put the stamps in my old MISTI because we were doing so many of them, and it just makes it easier for the women who are making the cards to have it in a MISTI so they don't make mistakes. And so I don't waste paper, because I don't necessarily enjoy going through a lot of paper. So this stamp is from the Mistletoe Magic stamp set, and this is in the Stampin' Up! July-December 2022 mini catalog. Beautiful stamp set. It's funny because I was telling people all of the samples for this stamp set in the Stampin' Up! Catalog have pink and red berries. And I don't know that I've ever seen a mistletoe with pink and red berries. So my berries are white, which is what I truly believe they should be. And I'm just going to stamp this image on here. Beautiful. I'm going to set that aside and let that dry for just a second while I do the other piece. The inside piece, the greeting on the inside comes from Brightest Glow stamp set, which, as you can see, has just a plethora of Christmas greetings and seasonal greetings. And this also is in the July-December 2022 mini catalog from Stampin' Up. So I'll set that aside and let's stamp this. And there's also a little piece of mistletoe on the inside, just a little sprig of it, and that came from the other stamp set, the Mistletoe stamp set. So let's ink this up again. And we'll just get a nice image here. Beautiful. I very rarely get a bad image from my MISTI. I absolutely can't live without it. If I'm doing multiple cards, if I'm doing just one card, I don't use it too often, but if I'm doing multiple cards, I definitely use it. And then on this piece, this is also "'Tis the Season" stamp is also from the, what was that stamp set again? From the Brightest Glow stamp set. And for that, I'm using, this is Cherry Cobbler ink, Stampin' Up! Ink that I'm using to stamp this. And I want to make sure that I'm stamping it with the correct orientation. There you go. We have that in red, or Cherry Cobbler if you're speaking Stampin' Up! Today. Oh, it looks like I have a little piece of somebody's hair on here. I'm glad I didn't get that in the middle of my image. when you share your stamps and your stamp sets and your ink with that many people, sometimes you get interesting things in your stamping pads when you get home. Interesting finds. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside with the... Actually, you know, let's go ahead and color them, because we're going to color all of the leaves and the berries. We don't obviously need to stamp the berries for the inside piece because it's already white, but I'll do the berries first, and I'm using watercolor pencils. These are also from Stampin' Up, and I'm coloring in the white berries with the white, and I'm coloring those in fairly solid. You'll see when I do the leaves that I don't do a solid coloring job when I do those, but for the berries I wanted to have them really stand out as being white against that Sahara sand cardstock. And this piece is cut out of the Colors and Contours dies. Again, you're going to get tired of this, again, from Stampin' Up. And those are in the annual catalog, not the mini catalog. Okay, so I'm going to let those sit there. For the stems and the leaves, you're going to see that I'm just kind of putting a line down the center of the stems or the side of the stems, and I'm only coloring in about half of the leaves, and you'll see why in just a minute when I start adding water to these. I'm putting down a fairly heavy line. These watercolor pencils, this is Old Olive, the other one was white. These watercolor pencils are very soft and waxy, so they leave quite, if you put down this heavy line, you get quite a bit of color from them. So again, I'm just coloring in half of each of these leaves, and I'm going to do the ones for the inside as well. So over here I'm just going to put a little line down the middle of the leaf, and then some color here and some color here on the dark side of the leaf. Ooh, dark side of the leaf. Sounds dark. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I have blender pens and I have aqua painters. The blender pen has a liquid in it, but if you want to add additional color later, if you don't get the color as intense as you'd like, the blender pen may not be the way to go because it has glycerin and other things in it, not just water. So it's hard to add another color over it because it has kind of a finish to it when you use it. It is easier to control. You don't get as much water. It's wet, but it's not overly wet, so you can spread the color out, but you don't have the same opportunity for adding more color later. So I'm going to set that aside, and instead I'm going to use my aqua painter, and this is filled with water. And the reason that I prefer using this again is because I can add more color to increase the intensity after I've done these if I want to. The other thing is I think I get more of a watercolory effect from using these. The only disadvantage is it does take a little bit longer to dry than the blender pens. So what I'm going to do is just go down each of these leaves, and I think I need to kind of coax a little water into that brush because I used this the other day and it has gotten a little dry right in the brush. And it actually may have, ooh, this is embarrassing, it may have become clogged a little bit. Yeah, I have another one. I have several of them sitting right here, just in the off chance that that had happened. So let's try this one. Keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully this one will work. Yeah, this one's nice and wet. So I am just going to bring the brush down through here, and you can see I'm pretty solidly covering these stems. But then when I get to the leaves, you'll see what I'm talking about. You can coax more water into the brush if you want to, but I generally don't do that. Now this is where the magic happens. I am pulling this around, this dark green. I'm pulling from the one side of the leaf, and I'm just kind of smearing it around. I'm really not using any particular technique. I'm just kind of pulling that color from the side where I've made that where I've colored it over to the other side, and I'm getting different shades of green as I go. So the bottom side of the leaf is staying pretty dark, while the upper side of the leaf is a little less intense color, which is exactly what I want for this. So you can add more color if you don't like what you're doing the first time around. You also, interestingly, you can use just a regular eraser, and you can erase some of that color if you don't like where it went. I generally don't, because to me watercolor is supposed to be messy. I like watercolor. I'm not very good at it, but I like it. And I like the look of kind of messy watercolors. And I'm not so concerned about controlling where it goes as I am just getting that watercolory, ethereal kind of look in there. So I'm almost finished with this one, and then I'll do the one on the inside. Now again, I did not color the holly or the mistletoe berries on the inside because it was already white and I didn't need to do that. Okay, that's finished. Now let's move over to this one, and I'm just gonna quickly color this in. This is very smooth white cardstock, and the color moves around very well on this. This is more porous. This is just the regular Sahara sand cardstock, and it doesn't move the color quite as well as it does on this just plain. You can see it just kind of moves around as I go. To clean these out, what I generally do is just take a piece of scrap paper and I just kind of go along the side and remove whatever color is left in there so that it's ready for me to use the next time. And of course the next time when I go to use it, generally what I do is test it on my scrap paper to make sure I haven't left any color in it. Okay, now here is the Wink of Stella. This is a glitter brush. It's not glue, it just has glitter on the inside. There's a cartridge on the inside that has liquid glimmer in it. And it's not an in-your-face glimmer, it's just a nice shimmer. So I'm going to go over these berries with the Wink of Stella, and that's the liquid that I'm using to spread that color around. And I know you can't see it so well in this light, but it does have a very nice shimmer to it as we finish up the berries. I'll turn on my light here in a second and see if we can't get that glimmer to show up a little bit. Okay. This is the light. You know, that still is not really showing up, but in real life that has a very pretty little, just kind of a shimmer to it, not an in-your-face blingy thing at all. Okay, now we're finished with all the coloring and painting, and we can assemble. So this piece will go on the inside. This is, the base is Mossy Meadow cardstock. It's 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, scored at 4 1/4 inches. And this piece is Cherry Cobbler cardstock. It is 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches. This is white cardstock. It is 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. So that just gives us an 1/8 of an inch border all the way around on each layer. And that just goes right here. And oops, it looks like maybe I picked up some ink from my work surface here as I was As I was coloring that in, I'll go back later with my ink eraser and I'll be able to get off just that little tiny spot there. So this is what the inside looks like. Now I'm going to work on the front. I'm going to open it out this way because I like that it stays nice and flat while I'm working on it, whereas if you have it closed and you're trying to work on the front of it, it keeps flopping up. No fun. No bueno. Okay, so this piece I have embossed with the Merry Melody embossing folder, and this is also Stampin' Up. And I'm using Encore Gold ink to go around the edges of this piece. This is actually not a current Stampin' Up product. It's not a Stampin' Up product at all, but I've been a demonstrator with Stampin' Up for 17 years, and over those 17 years they have brought this into their catalog, retired it, brought it back, retired it again. I think they may have even brought it back 3 times and then retired it. So I'm confident that it's going to come back again, and I continue to use it because it adds such a beautiful finish to this. What I'm going to do is just rub this directly onto this background piece, because I want to create some definition around the edge. I'm not concerned if I get, you know, a lot or a little, because I want it to look a little bit rustic, and that's all I did, was just rub that around the outer edges of the cardstock, and then that gives you that beautiful finish around the edges. And I'm going to adhere that to the front of the card. And then I have a piece of distressed gold 12 by 12 designer paper, and this is in the big catalog, the 22-23 annual catalog. Beautiful paper. You get 2 sheets in a package, 12 by 12, and I just love it. It's got a beautiful shimmer and shine to it, and I didn't want to waste paper, so this little bow came with the dies that coordinate with the mistletoe stamp set. So I cut this little bow out of the center of it because we're not going to see this anyway, and I'm going to attach this piece to this gold piece. And the gold piece is, well, I didn't write this down, so let me measure. It is, this piece is 4.5 by 3.25 inches. This die out of the contours, color and contours dies, is it's almost exactly the same size. So it's a pretty tight fit, but it's going to fit directly onto that. And it's leaving just that tiny little peak of the gold around the outer edges. And that kind of coordinates with this gold around the outer edge of the cherry cobbler cardstock. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some foam tape on the back of this to pop it up. And I bet you I took all my scissors up there, so I am instead going to use some Stampin' Dimensionals from Stampin' Up, which are foam hexagons. When I'm working on class projects, I usually use these, but if I'm working on my projects at home, I use the bigger foam tape, so I don't have to use so many pieces. And I do put probably more than I need on here when I'm using this, because sometimes the center of the card, for some reason when it gets into the mail, this center part just kind of sucks the air out of it and it flattens out. So I like to make sure that I have plenty of dimension on the back of it. So I'm just going to remove the backing from these. And I'm going to center this on the front of the card. And I I think that looks pretty centered. Okay, there we go. And then what I'm going to do is, don't forget that when you are using these types of these sheets, there is a lot of excess around the edges, and you can use that. So I actually do have a pair of scissors here, and I'm going to need it after all. So I'm going to cut just a little sliver right off the edge of this. You can see I have just this tiny little piece, and I'm going to put that behind this bow, just behind the knot, because I want it to pop up just a little bit. So right here behind the knot, I've got this little piece of foam that I've cut from the edges of the Stampin' Dimensionals, and I'm just going to attach that right there. But we're not finished, because, if you could add more bling, why wouldn't you? So I have these beautiful iridescent rhinestone basic jewels. These also are in the Stampin' Up! 2022-23 annual catalog. And I'm using just the small ones because to me this looks like a kind of a delicate design. So I wanted to just use the smallest of the gems, although you can see there are larger, medium size, and then the small ones in the package. So I'm just going to take one and put it right there, and then I'm going to put another one here, and then another one right here. And there we have it, the finished card. I hope you enjoyed this card, and if you want to see all of the dimensions, you can visit kathyscraftroom.blogspot.com, and all of the measurements and materials will also be included on that page. Thank you very much.